Okay. Thank you again, Pearl, for talking with me. So I'm just going to jump straight into some questions I have for you. So I'm
Okay.
actually super excited I'm going to watch the play tonight. So I'm really
Oh,
excited
wonderful. Okay.
to watch it. And my first question is if you could just tell us a bit about Blues for Alabama Sky.
Blues for an Alabama Sky takes place in New York City, in Harlem, which was a predominantly Black area of New York City in 1930. And it looks at a group of artists who were doing pretty good during a period called the Harlem Renaissance, when there were lots of Black artists coming to New York, coming to Harlem. There was a lot of patronage. People gave money to these artists. There were a lot of nightclubs. So there was a thriving community there for artists. And then the stock market crashed, and the United States economy was really in awful shape, so that a lot of these patrons no longer had money. They wanted to give to the arts. A lot of these artists who had been doing so well found that they had no place to do the work that they had been doing. So that it really, the moment that the play takes place is that moment when it goes from being a wonderful Renaissance full of activity and wonderful things to a time when these artists are really worrying about their survival. And into their group comes a young man from Tuskegee, Alabama, which is a small town in the deep South in the United States. Very conservative place, very different from New York City. And he meets this group of artists and falls in love with one of them because she looks like his late wife, although she could not be more different than his late wife. And they have to kind of figure out how to he has to try to figure out how to navigate this group, and they have to figure out their futures in the middle of this moment.
It sounds so interesting because you know what, I actually really love plays. It's set in 1930.
Yes.
I love plays where it kind of shows um, like African American stories set in like 30s. It kind of reminds me of a time when my grandma, even though she came to the UK, her siblings, they went to America instead. So it's really, I find it so interesting to kind of just hear about the journeys and stories because there's so many stories that we don't really hear a lot about in the UK.
Yeah.
They're super important. And I guess my question for you, Paul, is what inspired you or made you want to write this story?
Well, I've always been fascinated by the Harlem Renaissance. Since I'm a writer, I am an artist. I always felt like I would love to have been in Harlem at that moment because there were so many wonderful artists there working. So I've always been fascinated with it. And my mother actually shared my love of that period, and she used to read to us when we were little kids. She would read Langston Hughes poetry to us. Langston Hughes is a great African American poet who was a part of that Renaissance period. So that I kind of grew up with the Harlem Renaissance in my ear. But this play came about. My husband and I were coming from Montgomery, Alabama, which is the capital of Alabama. And I had a play done in the city. And so drove over. We drove from Atlanta, which is just 2 hours from Atlanta. But it was the first day that the King holiday, the national holiday here celebrating Martin Luther King, went into effect. And the Ku Klux Klan, a terrible white supremacist organization, was really angry about it. And they were picketing less than 2 miles from where my play was at the state capitol. And it just struck me as such a terrible thing that they were still angry at Martin Luther King years after he had died. And they were prepared to march and protest it. At the same time, 2 miles away, we had a very diverse audience enjoying a play by an African American playwright. And as we were driving back to Atlanta that night, it was dark, and we were driving through rural Alabama. And I kind of just looked out the window because I was processing everything that had happened. And I leaned my head out the window. You know how dogs will lean their head out of the window of a car? I did that. And it was such a beautiful night. And the sky was incredible. It was just full of stars, just a beautiful, beautiful night. And I remember thinking to myself, what would it be like to go from a place like this, where you could step out on your front porch and see this beautiful sky, nature is all around you, to move from that place to a place like New York City, where you have to look between the buildings to try to see if you can find a little piece of sky. And that kind of started my thinking about what if there was a character from that part of Alabama who went to New York and met a group of artists. What might that be like? But it actually started with that beautiful Alabama sky.
Wow. One day I hope I can see that sky. I love seeing stars, but here again, you never see them when you're in the city because pollution and everything kind of
And too
erases
much
them.
artificial light.
Yeah,
We're making so much artificial light that you don't get to see the light that's already there, you know.
exactly. And they're so beautiful. Um, Paul, is there any character in the play that has impacted you or inspired you the most?
Um, I really love Guy, who
Mhm.
is the costume designer, who is Angel, is one of the other characters. He's her best friend, and he is steady as a rock. He has a dream of going to Paris to design costumes for Josephine Baker, and he never one time wavers from that dream. And there's lots of activity going on around him, but he is really able to hold on to the dream that he has of going to Paris and of getting out of Harlem as everything is falling apart. So I love Guy a lot, but I also love Delia, who is a social worker who's working on family planning for the women of Harlem. I love her a lot. I love Doc, who is delivering all these babies in Harlem. And I love Angel, who is a terrified woman who does really awful things because that fear is making her think her life is going to be one of poverty and destitution. So she's really concerned about that. And I even have great affection for Leland, who is the Alabama man who comes forward, who has ideas and opinions that could not be more different than my own, but who is really trying to be a good man. But what it means to be a good man in Tuskegee, Alabama, is very different than what it means to be a good man in the middle of New York City. And I think that's the challenge always for me as a playwright, is that I don't have to love everything these characters do, but I have to find a way to love them, to understand them. Otherwise, you write villains that are like those old time villains with the mustache, that they're twirling the mustache and laughing that villain laugh and all of that. And that doesn't work. You have to find a way as a playwright to make these characters real people and to find something in them that the actor can love and something in them that the audience can love, so that even if they don't agree with the character, they can hope everything will turn out okay for the character. And in Blues for an Alabama Sky, everything doesn't turn out okay for everybody, but it's my job to make you want things to work out for them, and then when they don't, as an audience, we should feel something about that. We should feel sorry about that. We should feel confused about that. But we should feel something for them. And I think for this play, which strikes me because the play is 25 years old, that the issues are still issues that we're dealing with and fighting about and worrying about in the United States every day. Family planning, contraception, a woman's right to choose whether or not to have an abortion and into pregnancy, and conservative views that are assumed to be the best for everyone. We're dealing with those issues right now, and they were dealing with them in the 30s. I definitely was thinking about them when I wrote the play, and when I look at it now, I'm glad, of course, that the play is timely. But I'm sorry, as a citizen, that my country has still not found a way to deal more equitably with some of these issues that I raise.
It's true. I agree with you in the fact that when it comes to women's rights, it's like it's kind of time has stood still. So the wordings may change or the way things might slightly change, but it's still the same. It's just and it just never seems to move forward. And it's such a shame because it's like as women we just never have like it's just not equal at all, is it? There's just no kind of it just when does
And
it
it's
change?
really a terrible thing because women are the majority of humans on this planet, but we don't have the majority of the power on this planet. So that we're buffeted about by whatever men are in charge of whatever country we're in. And it's like taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. I was a part of the generation that fought very hard to get the laws changed so that you could have a legal abortion. I had friends who died from illegal abortions, so that I was very proud to be a part of that movement, very proud to be a part of the civil rights movement to guarantee voting rights, and to watch it be taken back and rolled back and all of that just within the very short period of my own lifetime, and not even my entire life, my adult lifetime. It's just really a sad thing. And I think that part of what, as women, we have to do is to understand that we have power if we will use it, if we will vote, if we will gather together and decide to do something, because we're still at the mercy of men who don't have the same questions that we have, even good men. And that's what I tell my men friends, and I tell my husband, you're a really good man, but you can never be a woman. And he's like, well, that's true. I love you, but I can't be a woman. I can't do it. So that they can't really fight our fight for us. And that's part of what the character in the play Delia is really working for, to be a woman with agency, to be able to talk about these issues, even when people think that it's not the best way to go. She is one who is prepared to stand up and try to organize people and work with people and go to the churches and talk about contraception and all of those things. Because if we don't, and we can see it around the world, if we don't do it as women, we're going to end up right back where we were in 1930, which is not the place I want to be. Definitely, I don't think that's a place where you want to be. And it's we have to stay vigilant. We have to stay active, or we're going to lose everything we've gained.
I completely agree with you. I think that, and that's the one thing I think I like about her character, just from reading the script, is the fact that she is a hero in her own self. The fact that she's standing up for something that most people will not stand up for. And people usually, the one thing I think is people are usually scared, so they might believe in it, but we're always scared of how others will respond or react to our opinions.
They are. I think that's very true. I think they're afraid of judgments, of people judging them. And I think they're also afraid of violence directed toward them. When we look around the world, we can see so much violence directed toward women. I mean, in my country, in your country, in countries all over, that women are subjected to violence at the hands of men who think that they should not be thinking and doing and behaving in the way that they want to. And that's terrifying, because it's easy to kind of say, we should do this, we should do this. But it's terrifying to be in the street and see yourself marching up into a group of men with baseball bats who are saying, no, you will not do that, who have the power to arrest you, who have the power to punish you in all the various ways that a legal system put in place by men who do not love women have put in place, or men who feel that their idea about what is best for women is the best idea, whether it's based on religion that they feel passionately about, whether it's based on economics, whatever it's based on, that moment when you as a human being say, I know best for you. I'm not you, but I get to make the decision about whether you have children, whether you marry, whether you can vote, all of those things, then I think you're really on a downhill slide, because everyone has to decide. Certainly about our own bodies. There is no other medical procedure in the United States where law is involved in it except abortion, except a woman's right to choose whether or not to bear children. And just the fact of that is so terrifying to me, that there isn't anything else where that can happen. And it's something that we have to question, we have to fight about it, we have to talk about it all the time, because otherwise we're going to see people dying, because women will have abortions, illegal abortions, if they cannot have them safely and legally. And that's what I remember from when I was a young woman. That's why my friends died, because they were determined not to have these children that they had not tried to have, but the biology caught them and they became pregnant. But they were not going to have this child, and it happens all over the world.
It's heartbreaking. I was reading in America that the statistics are higher for African American women, especially in regards to deaths, just purely because the way it's done will be done. I guess you can call it in a way back streets rather than anywhere else. You don't, and it's just so sad, because it's almost like this this new rule in place is executing a specific or targeting specific women, and it's very sad.
It is, and it really it's also a class question, because sometimes people will say, well, you can't, these states are really cracking down, but you can always go to another state. But that assumes that you have the money to go to another state, to have someone take care of the children you may already have, to get leave from your job, to buy a ticket to go to where you're going, and then pay for the abortion, and then come back and take care of yourself when you get home. And that is not realistic for most women. That just, we don't have those kinds of options. So there's that as well, that people are kind of, that women who are more privileged sometimes speak about options in a way that does not take into consideration that everyone doesn't have those options.
Yeah, I totally agree. I guess you have kind of answered this already, but why do you think it's important for the story to be told now? And also, what would you like the audiences that will watch it to take from your story?
Well, I think the issues that we're talking about certainly are reflected in the play and are an important element of it. But for me as a playwright, I really love these characters. I think that that they have interesting things to say. I think their relationships with each other are very interesting, and I think that what I want the audience to take away is less a political idea and more just the pleasure that you have when you go through a journey with characters on the stage who are interesting and vibrant and fully realized, so that whatever their journey is, you want to go there with them. You want to see what happens in Act One. You want to come back after intermission and see what will happen. So that I hope that these characters will grab the audience's attention and grab their imagination, so that they will want to take this journey with us and not just think about the politics, which of course are important, but also the moments that occur between these characters. There are several love stories in here. One is the one that Angel is having with Leland, which is a very cynical kind of story that really isn't based on love. And then there's a love story between Sam and Delia. And it's a much more innocent, certainly more genuine love story, but that's also a part of what the play is looking at. What does it mean to be in love? What do you have to do to actually be in an honest, fulfilling, passionate relationship with somebody that you care about? So I hope ultimately, and I hope this for all my plays, my novels, whatever stories I'm telling, my first issue is always making characters that people love. Nobody goes to the theater to be preached at about issues. Nobody picks up a novel to be preached at. We go to mass meetings for that. We go to church for that. So what I want is to bury the issues I'm talking about within a story that you can't resist, within characters that you can't resist. Angel does a lot of bad things, but she's a beautiful woman who can sing, and she has several really seductive moments where she gets to show you why people put up with all her junk, because she's so seductive and beautiful. And this the cast that they've got, I'm so sorry, I'm not a flyer. I don't like to fly, so I can't get there for the show, but I've had a chance to peek at them in rehearsal, and to just see some of the work they're doing, and some of the work that our director Lynette is doing, and they're just they're doing wonderful work. So I'm sure you're going to love this show.
I bet I will, to be honest. Hopefully they'll, because usually they record the play, so I hope that you'll get to watch the.
You're going to. We just settled all that, so I will.
Oh, amazing. Okay, good. So I'm glad that you're going to see it. I have a question for you, because I love writing, so it's something that I inspired to be one day to see my play on stage. And I guess my question for you is, what got you into writing?
I've always written. I think I'm very lucky in that regard, because I always wanted to tell stories. Even as a little child, I used to stand in my crib, which meant I was probably about 2 years old, and lean over the side and tell stories to my sister, who was 4. But I always wanted to tell a story. I wanted to create characters and make up stories about them, and I've always done it, so that I I've written all my life. I've kept journals all my life. I've written poems and plays and stories because that's really all I ever wanted to do. And I feel sorry when I hear young people talk about, I want to go to Broadway, I want to go to Hollywood, I want to, and they're always talking about money and fame. And I keep trying to say, you better love it. You better find a way to love what you do, because the percentage of writers that we come to know as famous and wealthy, and they're writing in beautiful beach houses and all of those things, that's a little tiny percentage of writers. Most of us are working hard every day, trying to do our work, trying to take care of ourselves, trying to figure out what are we talking about and what's the best way to talk about it. But I've always written. I was one of those children that would, write a story on a holiday and then make my cousins act it out, that kind of thing. I went to college and studied playwriting, and then I always wrote, and I never was thinking of it as a way to make a lot of money. I was thinking about it as a way to live an interesting life, to try to engage people with the ideas that I thought were interesting, and that's exactly what it's been. I think being a writer is a wonderful life. I think it keeps you aware of the world around you, and if you do it right, it really keeps you growing in your understanding of human beings every day. Human beings are endlessly fascinating to me. I have friends who are just, when they're in a line trying to buy tickets for a concert or trying to mail a letter and they have to stand in line, it drives them crazy. And I don't mind it if the people around me are talking, because I'm always eavesdropping. What are they talking about? Why is this line taking so long? What is this woman talking to the person in front of her about? All of those things, because I'm always looking for how we express what we feel. How do we say it? How do we tell each other that we love each other? How do we express anger toward each other? How do we express frustration or joy? And it's just a process, I think, of training yourself as a writer to always watch human beings, to always listen to human beings, because there's a million stories in everything. I used to drive my daughter crazy when she was younger, because we would go out shopping or something and I would see somebody and say, I wonder what she's thinking. I wonder this, I wonder this. And my daughter would be saying, I'm trying to find a pair of shoes. I really don't want to make up stories about these people we don't even know. But I think that's why I came here. I'm lucky that I came here knowing I was a writer and had a family who could nurture that in me, so that's what I've done my whole life.
Which is really lovely, because you've had this passion forever. And I was gonna, because I know you write novels as well, you write plays, you do so much. Is there a specific medium that is your favorite, or would you say they're all your
Theater.
favorites?
Theater is definitely my favorite. Writing is a very solitary activity. And many of us spend a lot of time talking to our friends, drinking wine around the kitchen table, talking about how great the book is going to be, how great the play is going to be. But eventually you have to actually send everybody home, sit down and write it. You have to put those words on paper. But if you're writing for the theater, when you get done with the script, the solitary aspect is over. Then you're a part of a group. You've got actors, directors, designers, producers, audience, all of those other people are involved in making that work come to life. And that's the only art form, the only writing art form that works that way. A novel, you write it by yourself, people read it by themselves. So that theater really gives me the best of both worlds. I have that solitary time that I crave as a writer, but I also have the wonderful interaction with other artists, because any group of people who are putting on a play, they become a little self-contained tribe for the time they're doing that play. We're in rehearsal together every day. We're hoping the show goes well. We try to make it work. We try to make it work, and then we invite the audience in and hope that they will love it. So that there's all of those interactions that don't happen when you're sitting at your desk by yourself. So theater is the thing that I really love the most. It's the most terrifying, because if you write a bad novel and somebody reads it and hates it, they'll say, oh, this is awful, and throw it over their shoulder, but you won't see it in the theater, if you write something bad and people hate it, you see them start checking their watches. They start filtering out. They don't laugh at the things you thought were funny. And when they're going out at the end of the show, they're talking about where they're going to go get drinks afterward. They're not talking about the play. So it's terrifying because it happens right in front of you. But it's also exhilarating because when it works well, everybody gasps at the same time. Everybody is leans forward at the same time. Everybody jumps at the same time. All of those things happen collectively because the audience becomes a collective unit. Not that they all feel everything the same, but they've agreed to come and experience this story together. So theater also is a very community building kind of art form because we all come together and it's very ancient. You know, it's like people living in caves and making that little fire and sitting around and trying to tell the stories of their tribe. You know, who was the one who was brave? Who was the one who was beautiful? Who was this? Who was that? And that's still what theater is. We get together, we sit in the dark, we look toward the light, and somebody's going to tell us a story about who we are. And I love that connects us all the way back to those campfires. And when I get crazy about this play is not working and why is this not coming together, I say, this is how it always is. This is how it's always been, trying to tell the story straight. So get to work. Stop whining, get to work, as I taught me to myself.
I really like that, how you compare it to, well, obviously the campfire. I've never thought about it like, and you're right, for years and years and years, even cavemen, they would have told stories, next to a fire. And you're right, the stage is like the fire. It's the light, and it is such a spectacle because I always, whenever I look at a candle blowing, it's like it's doing a performance for me. So yeah, no, I love that. I really like that analogy, Carl. I have some quick 5 questions for you, if that's okay. So my first one is, what is your favorite theatre space of all time?
My favorite theater space? Probably the small theater in the theater space in the theater where I'm in residence, which is the Alliance Theater in Atlanta. And we have a big theater that holds 800 people, but there's a small theater that holds 200 people. And I think 200 is a perfect number because everybody's right there together. So I would say the Hurt stage at the Alliance Theater.
Nice. And then the next one is your favorite play that you've either read or watched.
I love so many plays, but I think the one that had the most influence on me was Raisin in the Sun, which is Lorraine Hansberry's play about a family in Chicago. And I saw that play when I was about 11 years old. And I had been writing poetry and wanting to write plays. And my mother took me to see it. And it was so amazing to me. The people were like the people that lived in my neighborhood. We saw it in a high school auditorium, which was packed full of people. At the end, we all rose to our feet and we must have applauded for like 15 minutes. And I always think to myself, if the actors had been prepared to come and do that play one more time, we would have all been willing to sit there and watch it one more time. So that play really solidified for me what a play can be to community, how characters can really bring a story alive. So that's the one that made me know I was a playwright.
Nice. And then a dream guest. So it can be someone who you'd love to see the play, dead or alive.
Say it again.
So your dream guest to come to the National to watch your play at the moment, and they can be dead or alive.
Josephine Baker. I would love for Josephine Baker to come and see the play and to know how much we still think of her as being such a wonderful, complicated person. So I would love that. That's a great question I had, because as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, Josephine, of course.
That's a good answer, to be honest. I love Josephine Baker. And then your proudest moment, or your proudest career moment to date.
I don't know if I can pick one moment. I think my proudest extended moment is just the fact that I've been able to live as a writer for my whole life, that I have been able to raise my daughter, to be able to have friendships, to have a wonderful relationship in a marriage, to do all of the human things, but also to be a writer the whole time, to be a writer. And I think that trying to pick one is very hard to do, because I think the ability to keep doing it is the thing that makes me happy. I love a great opening night, of course. You know, and I love to be in rehearsal and all of those things. And I love to be awarded things. That's always wonderful when you say, oh, people like what I do. But the best gift to me has been the fact that I could build a life as a writer and continue to write and produce new work into my 70s, and hopefully on into my 80s and 90s as well.
That is, to be honest with you, it's an amazing thing, because it's so hard sometimes to, especially in the creative industry, to kind of constantly be creative and do what you love. So I think that's a huge achievement, and also it just reflects on how good you are as a writer, to be honest.
Thank you.
So yeah, no, that's awesome. And then my last fire question is the person who has had the greatest impact on your career.
I would say my husband, who is also a writer, Zarin Burnett is his name, and he's a wonderful writer and a great first ear to hear something, because I'm absolutely confident in his affection for me, but I know that he'll tell me the truth. And sometimes when people love you, they won't tell you this is a little weak right here, or maybe you could do this, or think about that. And his reactions are always absolutely truthful, as a writer, talking about what he sees in the work, and also because he knows what I'm trying to do with that work. So he's not trying to impose his will on me. But I think throughout my my writing life, having him as a first ear to hear the piece has been just incredibly helpful, because you have to have somebody hear it for the first time, and if it's someone who actually knows your work and knows you, that's the best.
Yeah, that's lovely. My very final question for you, Carl, is can you tell us what your next career plan is with writing?
I'm actually working on a play now called Something Moving, and it's a piece about the election of Atlanta's first African American mayor, which was 50 years ago. In 2024, it'll be 50 years. And it happened on the heels of the Voting Rights Act, and 100 years after our Civil War. We had this election, and it was really, in a sense, the actual ending in my mind of the Civil War, because what it meant was that we were now, as African Americans, fully vested citizens. We could vote. We had all those rights that you have to have as a citizen. And I actually worked for our first African American mayor. Maynard Jackson was his name, for 2 years. So I have a very clear idea about what that moment felt like from the inside and the outside. So I'm writing that piece for Ford's Theater in Washington, where it will be done in next year, 2023, and then come back to Atlanta in 2024. And it's wonderful to be able to write about, the town that you love, and say, remember this moment when we did this wonderful thing. This is what it felt like to be there. So I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, that's amazing. If I'm in America at that time, I will definitely have to check it out. I've never been to theatre in America. I'd love to say, yeah, I will. Pearl, thank you so much for talking to me. It's been absolutely wonderful.